Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 179 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. You can try StrengthCoach.com out for 3 days for just $1. And remember, if you have a staff of 2 or more and you want to sign up as a group, we have a special membership offer for you, up to 50% off. Check it out at StrengthCoach.com. All right, I'm your host, Anthony Reno, and the show notes are located at StrengthCoachPodcast.com. Want to get in touch with me? Shoot me an email to StrengthCoachPodcast@gmail.com. All right, on the Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about where he is at with the whole experimentation of the Philip Beach information, his article Progressing to Bodyweight Plyometrics, and his article Using the Assault Air Bike. That and much more coming up on the Coach's Corner in a little while. Aaron McGurr from Perform Better joins us to talk about the current Spend More, Save More sale and the Glute Bridge Roller, a new product. For the Results Fitness University Business and Fitness segment, Alan Cosgrove is on to talk about understanding the client mindset. For the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, I have sports performance coach Allistair McCaw. Allistair is the founder of the McCaw method. He's on to talk about strength and conditioning in tennis, the demands of the sport and programming, injuries in tennis, the heavy volume of junior players, and what makes a good coach. That and more coming up from Coach McCaw in a little while. For the Art of Coaching with Exos, Keir Wenham-Flatt is on to finish his 3-part series on the 3 pillars of physical preparation for rugby. Today he talks about fueling the activity via the metabolic system. For the Functional Movement System segment, Frank Dolan continues his series on a review of all 7 screens of the FMS. Today he talks about the active straight leg raise. Lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. Coach, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Ann. How are you?
All right, doing okay, hanging in there. All right, I was sick over the holidays, so we were supposed to have a podcast about a week ago, but I wanted to kind of see where you are right now because we haven't talked for a couple of weeks with this whole Philip Beach experimentation. Have you taken some of the stuff out of the warm-up? Has it been enough time? Where are you right now?
I'm just still playing around with doing the postures as often as I can. Myself, walking around my rocks. I got my beam with my rocks. My back feels unbelievable. I actually, if you notice, I posted a little bit on the site. I posted a little excerpt from his book talking about that because I thought it was really interesting that he also supports this idea of not twisting and the idea of rotary motion being tough on your intervertebral discs. And in the same 2 paragraphs, he's talking about the innovation of the low back and feet. So we still haven't made any major changes from a programming standpoint, but I think where the big change will probably come for us will be in trying to institute a formal cool down in the summer. I think that'll be the biggest thing. And then maybe changing what we're still sort of struggling with our, trying to perfect our adult programs anyway. But, yeah, trying to get these postures put in. I honestly think that some of the staff are maybe more resistant than I am in terms of – I thought I was one who really dislikes change, but I think they dislike it more than I do because I thought it would be very quick where people would be like, okay, boom, 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 let's get this stuff in there. And that hasn't really happened. What I've also found, which is interesting, is my clients – I show my clients the postures and the different stretches and things to do, and they proceed to go through the exact same stretches that we've been doing. My clients are literally like trained rats. They want to come in and they want to do exactly what they did before, exactly the way they did it before. And it's kind of humorous for me to sort of watch them. At some point, it's going to be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. But right now, I'm just kind of, I love the process. I really do, of looking and thinking, wow, it's amazing the resistance to change. And then you see why there are so many coaches. Like, think about coaches who, are still back squatting and doing lat pull downs and doing things that I just would never even think about doing. But then you realize, wow, you've got these people who are just super resistant to change. And it's that, why can't we do it the way we always did it?
Do you think
so? It's a very interesting social experiment too.
Are some of the, your younger coaches, do you think the resistance might be in the fact that a lot of coaches, talk about, not getting enough work in. And if you kind of listen to some of the, I'm drawing a blank right now as to who was talking about it, but talking about really, we're not really getting the amount of work that we think we're getting. So for example, maybe some of the younger coaches feel like, listen, the rest, we're getting enough rest. We've talked about enough recovery. We feel like our people are getting enough recovery. This is too much.
You know what I think? I would look at it slightly differently and say, I think part of the problem is that they're young and that they're not in pain. So, most of the young people that I have working for me are in great shape. So I don't think they necessarily see the necessity of certain things like I do. Whereas I'm so ecstatic about, Anna's talk and the Philip Beach stuff and all this stuff because I feel better at 56 years old. I mean, I feel significantly better. It's hard to even, for me, I'd love to marginalize it in my head because I've been seeing John Golf a little bit, and he was working on my back a little bit. But I was slowly getting better, I probably had, when I started seeing John, I was pretty much constant morning pain. You know what I mean? I'd get up every morning and my back would hurt. And I was seeing John, and that was definitely getting better. He was helping, mobilizing some lumbar spine stuff, doing some work on my psoas. But the addition of the barefoot stuff, most significantly, I think maybe even more than the resting postures, I have to attribute this really massive change to that in terms of, from a back pain standpoint, I'm pain-free. I'm pain-free at night. I'm pain-free in the morning. I sleep longer. It's a little bit, it's crazy to me, the difference. But when you've got these young staff people who don't have those issues, it's probably not as, dramatic, I guess.
Yeah. All right, good stuff. Coach, you wrote an article called Progressing to Body Weight Plyometrics. And my question, it's kind of using the total gym. And you've talked about this in the past with the what was the machine you were using before?
MVP shuttle.
MVP shuttle, yep. Which was more, I guess, it was almost like you were lying down, whereas the total gym is more of an angle. Coach, let me ask you something. How is this different, really, from a leg press? I guess if it was a math equation, I would say, leg press is to strength what the total gym is to power. I mean, we're on this machine. How can this be so different from us saying, well, we can also get on a leg press machine for strength?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because the difference is this allows you, I think one of the things that we talk about with power training when you start talking about jumping is that what goes up must come down, and you've got the acceleration due to gravity, which means once you move your body up off the ground, your body is going to return to the ground with its full mass at 32 feet per second. And you can't do anything about that in normal jumping. When you're in these horizontal and or semi-horizontal, like you're right, the MVP shuttle is horizontal, and the total gym moves it, so it starts a little bit above the horizontal and then moves to probably about a 45-degree angle, I guess. In those situations, you can now jump with a lower percentage of your body weight. So unlike with the leg press, and with a leg press, you can also leg press with a lower percentage of your body weight, but that isn't affected by that acceleration due to gravity. So I think that's the big thing that you're looking at is that what is going up is coming down, but what's coming down is not the same mass as if you were standing straight up and down. That's really the difference. So, and that's really, like I said, with the total gym, I think, and I don't have the article in front of me, but I want to say that you can start at the bottom with about 30% of your body weight, which means, say I've got a 200-pound woman, and I think, well, I'd really love to do some power work with her, but, squat jumps, box jumps, I get 200 pounds going up and I get 200 pounds coming down. This person's going to probably very quickly, maybe, they could have any number of things. They could have, plantar fasciitis from that. They could have patellofemoral problems from that. They could have hip problems from that. There's a bunch of stuff that could happen that's not a result of the jumping, but is a result of the landing. Whereas if I put them in these horizontal and or semi-horizontal jumping positions and then have them come up, I can gradually introduce those tissues to high-speed contractions in the takeoff and then reduced load landings in the landing phase. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely, it does. It just, I mean, taking it for what it's worth, it's a regression, and it's kind of introducing the tissue to these jumps. Because I was just feeling like, okay, even with a relatively overweight client or an older client, it's all relative in fact that they're not jumping that high anyway, or an older client's not jumping that high anyway, and I'm not asking them to jump. Let's say I'm doing a skater really far, or to do a vertical jump, I'm not asking them to go really high. So I'm just it's more of an interest.
The difference is that they still possess that same mass no matter. And it's funny when you look at, it's very interesting when you look at this, and I wish if I had my computer open, I could kind of pull up the stats. But particularly when you get into single leg landings, I think it's walking is like 1.5 to 2 times body weight with every foot strike. And then I think with jumping, I want to say with jumping, it can go up to something like 20 times body weight, or from a number standpoint, a really high number. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we kind of forget that, and we miss that, and we don't realize that, wow, I can really be exposing these people to some really significant forces. And I think I learned it more when I was doing rehab with people, because sometimes, you get an athlete who is pretty explosive, and you're trying to develop that tissue tolerance. And that was when I really started to see the value of the MVP shuttle when I first got it, when it was a rehab piece. But then I started to realize, wow, to me, I always say to people, it's probably, whether it's Total Gym or MVP shuttle, I would go so far as to say it's probably the only really essential. If someone said, I have to get one, I can only get one piece of equipment beyond sort of the conventional, barbell, dumbbell, kettlebell kind of stuff, it would be one of my first choices, probably beyond like some kind of pulling machine, some type of pull-down machine, because of that ability to introduce these less than body weight loads. All
right. Okay. Coach, let's just go. You wrote an article, and we just kind of, we forgot about it because we've been talking so much about the Philip Beach and Hartman stuff. You wrote an article about using the Assault air bike, and I want to just kind of keep it as really a general conversation, not so much about the Assault. But you were talking about you get a maximum aerobic speed first on the bike, and that's a speed that you can maintain for about 6 minutes, which is 1.5 miles on the old computer you'd sit on the bike. But it was, at the end of the day, it was a speed you can maintain for 6 minutes. And then from there, you get your average RPMs, which will correspond to your max aerobic speed. Just talk to us about what you're doing with this information. Can you just kind of give us a summary of that kind of testing and those numbers that you want to use to get to the numbers that you need for the intervals?
Yeah, it's interesting. So if you look, this kind of comes out of some of the European stuff, like Dan Baker stuff, who's Australian. They start looking at this, this concept of maximum aerobic speed, and then trying to, because I think one of the areas where I think we fail is trying to pinpoint interval loads for people. Trying to look and say, okay, I want you to train, sort of at this speed on the bike. Because the reality is, until you've kind of got this maximum aerobic speed number, you don't know what that speed is. Basically what we're looking at is, if I hop on, you don't want it to be specifically Assault, but at least if we throw some numbers in there. If I ride the Assault bike at 60 revolutions per minute, it takes me 4 minutes to ride a mile. And then, if I ride a mile and a half in 6 minutes, then I can look at that and say, okay, my maximum aerobic speed, the RPMs at maximum aerobic speed are 60. if I then say to somebody, all right, I want to do intervals, and I want you to go 110% of your maximum aerobic speed, I can then say, I need you to pedal the bike at 66 RPMs for whatever. Let's just say we're going to do 30 seconds on and a minute off. And I want you to go 30 seconds at 66, and then you can just spin the wheels for a minute. That's going to allow me now to really specifically relate that prescription to that person. And what used to happen is someone would say, I just want you to sprint for 30 seconds. And usually what happens in that case is somebody sprints for 30 seconds, and let's just say maybe they go 70, maybe they go 75, maybe they go 80, and then their legs get really sore, and then sometimes they throw up. And then you realize, oh, my God, they did one interval and they're toast and they can't do any more. And you realize, well, that's because you didn't do a good job as a coach prescribing the correct interval level for them. So it allows you to pick that number. So I think that's really the key. The problem with it is it's not as easy to do and relate, although it's funny. I went through the calculations one time with kind of looking at, all right, if you can run, say, a 6-minute mile, and then trying to break that down to like miles per hour and then per second. And then the interesting thing about it is that the numbers kind of dropped in right at about the numbers that we tended to use for our shuttle runs after I went all the way through all the math calculations, which is pretty interesting. But in the same way with running, I mean, if we're going to run a 300-yard shuttle, obviously someone who can run a 5-minute mile is going to run that 300-yard shuttle as a general rule of thumb at a different speed and rate than someone who can run a 6-minute mile and someone who can run an 8-minute mile. So by getting that maximum aerobic speed number, we can then prescribe our intervals much more specifically.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I was interested in, because I didn't even read the article until today, I think. And I was like, wow, because it is very hard to kind of get that kind of pace on the Airdyne for me. I like for people to get them or to give them a number specifically. It's like, all right, go hard for this amount of time. So
right.
You're right. They can't.
And that's what we found with our coaches is that they'd say to the kids, sprint as hard as you can. And then we'd go in and literally like there'd be kids all over the floor. There'd be kids with their heads in the barrels. And you think, okay, that didn't work. And particularly, and it works even less. There's almost like an older client probably is going to self-regulate because they're not going to do anything really stupid.
Yeah.
Whereas kind of your young athletic kids are going to go nuts. They're going to kill it for the first 10 seconds. And then you look and think, okay, you just did, 30-second sprint. You did 10 seconds at 80 RPMs. And then 10 seconds at 70, and then 10 seconds at 50, because you couldn't even move your legs anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm finding some of the older people will try to dog it, too. So
right.
That's what I was
well, and that's exactly what you want to see on the other end. Exactly, and that's why we have, we're trying to get everybody to, okay, what can they ride a mile in? What can they, because you will get some sense of where they are. And then you also can retest that MAS number and start looking and saying, because again, you might look at your MAS and say 6 minutes, but usually what we do is we try to select a distance that will correspond roughly to that number. So like I said, for us on the Airdyne, it's on the new assaults, it's 1.5 miles. And so we want to see, okay, what can you do the 1.5 miles in? And again, our sort of moderately fit athletes are around 6 minutes in that 1.5 miles. And our really fit athletes are down almost as low as 5 minutes in the 1.5 miles.
Wow.
But again, that gives you a very different, the person who's riding, like I think I've ridden in 5:11 or 5:15 or something, but I'm about 67 RPMs, which means when I start programming my intervals, I start adding, say I add 7, now I want to be 74 for 110%, and I want to be like 81 for 120, versus someone who might be 66 and 72 if they were at 60. And those are really significant differences when you get on those bikes and start trying to do it. So it does end up being actually very predictive.
Yeah, it's good stuff. All right, Coach, we'll let you go. Thank you for coming on today, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you very much, Ant. It's always a pleasure.
All right, now it's time for the Ask the Equipment Experts with Perform Better, and I'm here with Erin McCaw. Erin, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, well, Happy New Year, first of all.
Yeah, Happy New Year. It's holidays came and went.
They did.
I don't know if I'm happy or sad.
You're sad, and it's just because you're old now. Because they go by so quick. Sorry
Yeah, I'm
about
old.
that. Let's talk about your sale right now, because the holiday sale is obviously over. So, what do you got going on?
It is. I know. I feel like it was going on forever. But we now have a Spend More, Save More special going on. So we've had it in the past where you spend $50 up to $99, you'll get 10% off of your order. When you spend $100 to $149, you'll get 15% off your order. And when you spend over $150, you will receive 20% off. So some of the higher ticket prices, it actually looks pretty good because you're getting 20% off. So it's not a bad deal to start off with.
Very cool. No restrictions, right, on that one?
There are some exclusions, not too many though, but just the typical, cardio pieces or whatever manufacturers limit us to. I know Kaiser's one of them that will never let us do anything.
Oh, yeah.
But other than that, for the most part.
No, but it ends up being really like a free shipping plus, technically, because like with something like, heavy, has some of the heavier stuff, to get 20% off is like getting that free shipping. So it's good stuff. All right. Awesome. Hey, we got a new product.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
I just mentioned it to you.
I know, I just saw it, and I was like, what is this silly thing? Tell us about it.
Well, I wanted to talk about it. Actually, I'm in our gym right now, and I was just playing around with it. So I thought it'd be great to talk about because, like you said, it is one of our new products, and it is our glute bridge roller. We've gotten the question a lot of times where people use valve slides or anything similar, and they're like, what works on rubber? What works on rubber? And we never have a good answer. But this thing started off, again, we call it the glute bridge roller because there's been some products that were similar in the past where you can put your heels in. It's got an angled center, and it's got 4 wheels, so you can put your heels in and lay on your back and do glute bridges. So that's kind of how the name came about. However, the way we ended up designing it is you can flip over and put your toes in it. So if you wanted to do knee tucks or pike ups, instead of just glute bridges, that's always an option. We also added handles, so there's 7-inch handles on each side, and you can do upper body rollouts or core work. And then Mike Boyle is the one that was playing around with it and was like, you guys should really put like a plate on here or something so people can stand on it. So we ended up putting a center foot plate in the middle of it, which is unique because, like I said, nothing else out there ever had the handles, but they definitely didn't have the foot plate. So now you can stand and do your lunges. You can do some, forward lunges, back lunges, lateral work, just with your feet on it as well. So what started out as a glute bridge roller, a simple tool, turned out to be something where we incorporate in our circuits all the time out here. And again, it changes every time. So we'll put our toes in, we'll stand on it, we'll do rollouts. And it's really been great because we do have the turf here, but we have a lot of rubber as well. So it's something where we finally have a solution to people asking the question like, oh, I love my valve slides or I love my, sliding pads, but what can I use on rubber? So it glides great. It's awesome. It's been a huge help.
Yeah, I mean,
I really like it.
Another thing is, I think you're forgetting it. Kind of what Mike was asking you for that plate was for. It looks like obviously it's like when you're doing some of those slide board lunges, so it can actually replace that a little bit. So yeah, not only the valve slide, but that slide board, those slide board lunges, like the back lunge, etc. And and obviously with the handles now, it's like doing the rollouts. But one funny thing is if I'll warn everybody, if you go online and go up on look for the glute bridge roller, it's not going to look like you're going to probably pass it and say, no, this must not be it, because it just looks like almost like a little bit of a cart that you'd put stuff on, and that be like, oh, okay, no, I must find something else here. But that's
I'm going to add some more pictures to it today. That's on my list of things to do.
Cool.
So now that you said it, I would never think of that.
Yeah,
because
I was like, no, she must be talking about something else here. Very cool.
It's a cart. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, there you go. The glute bridge roller. Alrighty, well, thank you for coming on and talking about the sale and the glute bridge roller. So make sure everybody checks it out. It looks like it's going to be something that people are going to be talking about soon.
Yeah, and you get 15% off with the sale going on right now.
There you go. Get something else, and you'll get even more off. 20%. Spend more, save more. Alrighty, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Hello and welcome back to the Business of Fitness segment here on the Strength Coach podcast. This is sponsored by ResultsFitnessUniversity.com. Today's lesson is, I know I've talked about it before, but I got a lot of questions this morning from some of my coaching group and some other people, and this is a good time for this. Understand the client mindset. You are not your client, right? In fact, most of us listening to this are not normal, right? We check into a hotel when we're on vacation, and the first thing we do is we check out the hotel gym, and we're all psyched that it has free weights in it, right? We do a squat workout, and your legs are so sore, you're excited, and you post on Facebook. Well, your clients don't want that. They come to the gym to enhance their lives. They come to the gym. They don't want to go to the gym. They want to get better at what they do. A good example is your host for the Strength Coach podcast, Mr. Anthony Vena. Anthony runs 5 Iron Fitness and trains a lot of golfers. Here's the problem. If I'm a golfer and I can golf 6 hours a week, I don't want to go to the gym because all I have is my 6 hours a week. Going to the gym means not going to the golf course, and that's not an acceptable trade-off. So Anthony has to overcome that by understanding what a golfer does want. They want to play golf well, right? And it's the same with endurance athletes. If you're in an area where there's a strong running community or cycling community, you can give them all the evidence you want on strength training, improving running performance, but they would have to not run 1 day a week in order to use your services. That might be too much of an obstacle for them to overcome until you understand their mindset. Their mindset is they want to run, and they don't want to be injured, and they want to be fast. They want to win races and hit PRs. So your pitch for these guys, for golfers or for runners or endurance athletes, is that if you give me 10%, men beat females at all distances in racing, and they beat them at golf too. So that tells us the reason is strength. So strength is important. If you give me 10% of your training week, so if you're a runner who runs 4 hours a week, that's 240 minutes. If you give me 24 minutes a week that I can spend on strength training and injury prevention, we can improve your performance, right? So that's usually 1.5 hour session, right? You can stretch that out to give me 10% for injury prevention and 10% for strength training, and we'll improve your performance and keep you out on the road running. That will resonate with them because you're understanding the client mindset. Excuse me. If you can see John Smith through John Smith's eyes, you can sell John Smith what John Smith buys. So the idea, the homework for you now is to think about, why don't you hire a trainer? What are you looking for in a trainer? And what's all the reasons why you wouldn't hire a trainer? Right? That's how I want you to think. Because that's how your prospect thinks. Now we're thinking more like a client. Why would someone hire you? They don't want to come 5 days a week. They don't want to eat chicken and broccoli. What is it that they want? So the perfect example is the running example. They want to be out running. They don't want to be injured. The golfer wants to play more and play better. And you are a solution to that problem. So start seeing yourself through your client's eyes. You'll be able to keep clients longer. You'll be able to attract more clients. And just by getting their buy-in like that, you'll be able to get better results with them. So that's it for this week. Understand the client mindset. Write that down somewhere where you can see it every day. Think like a client, not like a trainer. That's it this week, guys. My name's Alan Cosgrove from ResultsFitnessUniversity.com, and I'll talk to you guys next time.
Hi, welcome to the Art of Coaching with Exos. My name is Keir Wenham-Flatt, and I am the Exos strength coach responsible for training Los Pumas Argentina, the national rugby team of Argentina. This is the final part of a 3-part series in which I've been outlining the 3 primary areas in which we focus in the preparation of our rugby athletes. In part 1, I introduced the 3 topics, that is the central nervous system, the neuromuscular system, and the metabolic system. And I spoke about how we train the central nervous system to apply the force that we have in the most effective manner possible with the highest degree of efficiency, but also the highest degree of adaptability to reflect the changing demands with which our athletes are faced on the field of play. And then in part 2, we talked about how we're going to train the neuromuscular system to maximize the potential of the body to produce muscular force against resistance. And now in part 3, we're going to talk about how we train the metabolic system to fuel that activity. Now, I think, like the neuromuscular system in part 2, a great starting point for this discussion is the philosophy. What is the final objective or destination of our program that informs all the steps we have to take us from where we are now to where we want to be? And for energy systems, I've yet to hear a better philosophy than that proposed by a great strength coach named Mladen Jovanovic. And he said to me that the goal of ESD is simply to perform high-intensity efforts with the greatest possible intensity, frequency, and sustainability. Within a rugby context, that means that all the high-intensity activities we perform, like sprinting, tackling, rucking, mauling, scrummaging, kicking, passing, and so on, we want to be able to perform those with the highest possible rate of power output when we perform them, but also to be able to repeat those efforts again and again and again as frequently as possible and for as long as possible. And another important area to consider when we come up with our energy system philosophy is that of fatigue. That is how and why we cannot sustain exercise. And updated thinking suggests that fatigue is simply a decision by the central nervous system to protect itself from any future damage associated with sustaining exercise. So rather than exercise being physiologically limited in the cell via a depletion of substrate or an accumulation of byproducts, for example, rather the CNS is constantly making a decision about whether it can sustain exercise based on a mixture of internal and external feedback, with internal feedback including the accumulation of those byproducts and various other physiological variables, and external feedback being the information that we process from our external environment. Now, bearing these two important areas in mind, the philosophy and how we fatigue, you would assume, and rightly so, that we need a mixture of all 3 energy systems to meet the demands of rugby union: the alactic pathway, the glycolytic pathway, and the aerobic pathway. And obviously you'd be right. However, for our athletes, we actually try and emphasize the greatest possible reliance on the alactic and aerobic pathways to meet the demands of the game, and try to minimize the reliance of the athlete on the glycolytic system. And this is for a few different reasons. One is simply philosophy. If you look at what we said the philosophy is, high-intensity efforts repeated for the greatest possible frequency and sustainability, we know that the glycolytic system is neither the most intense nor the most sustainable of the systems that we have. A second reason is that many of the metabolic byproducts which the CNS uses to make a fatigue decision, such as the accumulation of lactate, inorganic phosphate, hydrogen ions, and so on, these are byproducts of use of the glycolytic energy system. So rather than become as reliant as possible on that system, we would rather treat the system like an overdraft in a bank account. We know it's there if we need it. We know that we can use it if we have to. However, we would rather not use it in the first place. So rather than learn how to suffer better, we would rather teach our athletes how to suffer less in the first place. This is not to say that we don't train the glycolytic system. We do train it. However, we normally let rugby and matches take care of this. One, because of the low trainability of the glycolytic system, but also because we would rather dedicate a larger amount of training time and effort towards the development of the alactic pathway and also the aerobic pathway, which in particular is far more trainable. So a major part of our energy system development program is trying to maximize the physiological capacity of our athletes to meet the demands of a rugby game via the alactic and aerobic pathways to reduce the byproducts that will trigger a CNS decision to fatigue. However, we can't forget the role of the central nervous system in fatigue and energy system development. This is because everything begins and ends with the brain. So once we have attempted to maximize the physiological development of the athlete, we will then switch our focus in the later stages of preparation towards fine-tuning the central nervous system to maximize energy system development. And by this, we will try and take advantage of the plasticity of the central nervous system to tolerate fatigue. This is what would normally come under the traditional term of mental toughness. Not only this, but we're going to try and provide our athletes with a guided discovery learning environment whereby they can develop movement strategies which allow them to maximize their effectiveness on the pitch whilst minimizing energy cost and minimizing that reliance on the glycolytic energy system, as we've already said. Finally, what we'll also do is try and minimize the energy expenditure of the athlete via increased efficiency of motor patterns, which we mentioned in training the central nervous system in part 1. And this will bring to a close our 3-part series about the primary areas which we utilize to improve the performance of our rugby athletes within Argentinian rugby. Thank you very much for your attention, and speak to you soon.
Hi, this is Frank Dolan for the Functional Movement Systems segment of the Strength Coach podcast. Today we're going to be continuing our series on the FMS basics and review of the fundamentals. Today we'll cover the active straight leg raise. In order for consistency and reliability of the test, it'll be important that we follow the same verbal instructions, some key tips for testing, criteria for the test, and then some of the nuances and often missed items, as well as questions and mistakes that people make. So we'll get through first some of those verbal instructions. We want to make sure that we're saying this exactly the way that it's written. This way we have that consistency and reliability of the test. We're going to instruct the client to let us know if they have any pain while performing any of the movement. We'll have them lay flat on their back with their knees against the 2x6 and their toes pointed up. So we'll usually have them place their head on one side of the kit, their feet on the opposite side of the kit with their knees over the board or over the 2x6. We'll have them place both arms next to their body with the palms facing up. We'll begin with the feet together in a neutral position, so toes are going to be pointed straight up. With the scoring leg remaining straight and the back of the opposite knee maintaining contact with the 2x6, they'll raise the scoring leg as high as possible. So the moving leg is the side that we're scoring. You'll ask them if they understand those instructions. And that is basically our script when we get them started for the verbal instructions. Some things that we need to know is that we are going to take a measurement from the ASIS, or anterior superior iliac spine, down to the midline of the knee joint. So we'll take that measurement with the stick and create a midpoint between the ASIS and the midpoint of the patella. Okay, that point is going to indicate if the person scores a 3 or a 2, so that's an important point. Some of the tips for testing is that the moving leg is going to be identified as the side being scored, so just do a little review there. If there is difficult finding the joint line, you can have them flex the knee to make sure that you can see where the middle of that patella is. You want to make sure that the non-moving limb maintains a neutral position. We'll have them repeat the test on both sides, make sure we're scoring both, and the client can perform the movement up to 3 times on each side if necessary. The criteria to get a 3 is that the vertical line of the malleolus, so that little round bone on the outside part of the ankle, resides between the mid-thigh and the ASIS. So it's got to pass that point that you're placing the stick between the patella and the ASIS. The non-moving limb must also remain in that neutral position and completely still. To get a 2, the moving leg is not passing that midpoint of the thigh. So the vertical line of the malleolus resides between the mid-thigh and the joint line of the patella. The non-moving limb also needs to remain in the neutral position. To get a 1 on the test, the vertical line of the malleolus resides at the top of the movement below the joint line, so they're not able to pass the opposite side knee with the malleolus. The non-moving limb also, in this case, remains in that neutral position. If any pain is reported with this movement, we're going to give them a 0 on the test. So some of the tips for testing we've covered already. We've covered the criteria. Let's just talk really quick on some nuances. We want to make sure, this is review, but making sure that the palms are up at their sides. If they're able to press down with their hands, that's going to create a little bit of stabilization that can help them with the test. We don't want that. We want palms up. We want to make sure that the neck is relaxed. They shouldn't be watching their feet by, crimping their neck and looking down at their legs. We want to make sure they're relaxed through the neck. The bottom leg, it's key that we make sure that knee does not bend. That's supposed to stay touching the 2x6 on the down leg. The foot shouldn't move in or out. We can use our finger or a pen to not hold the foot in position, but potentially just feel for movement. So if the foot moves out, which is typically what would happen with the compensation, you can feel that pressure. You don't want to hold the foot in place. You just want to feel for movement so that you can tell them that's the end of the movement. we want to make sure that the speed is at a very slow pace. If they're moving the leg very rapidly, they're going to be able to pass a point that maybe they don't really own, and you may not be able to see that the knee bends or some other movement goes on at the foot. So we want to make sure that speed stays slow. The lifted leg knee could potentially bend as well. Sometimes you'll see that. That would indicate that they shouldn't keep moving forward, right? You only want to go as far as they can go with that knee being straight. Some people do have a little bit of slight knee bend. I've heard some people not being able to straighten out all the way. Their terminal knee extension is not the same as most people. That's okay as long as you don't see any extra knee bend as they start to move up, okay? Because they probably will be able to keep the back of the knee touching the 2x6 in that start position with a slight knee bend. If they keep that same angle of knee bend throughout the movement, that's totally fine. As mentioned before, we want to make sure that the instructions are consistent across the board for reliability. This way everyone's doing the test exactly the same. Good luck administering the active straight leg raise. Next time we're going to talk trunk stability push-up. That's going to be all for today. For more information on the functional movement screen, make sure to visit functionalmovement.com.
All right, now it's time for the Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach, and today I have Allistair McCaw on. He's a sports performance coach, inventor of the McCaw method. And Allistair, we've been communicating for a while. He has... he's a former elite athlete who got into coaching, which is a good thing for the youth tennis players of the world. So, Allistair, thanks for coming on today.
Anthony, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, you and I are very in a similar situation, I think, where we work with different athletes, but we kind of focus on that one group. And I know, obviously you work with a lot of tennis players, and I've actually worked with a couple tennis players in the past, and I think it's interesting. We'll talk a little bit later about this whole idea of sport specific, because there's always that argument. But there are things that I feel like in golf, and that we need to kind of take care of. But we know that there's a foundation that we all need. But then there's specific things that we want to look at. But what I kind of like about just kind of looking at your background is the where you came from. And people who listen to the podcast know that I talk about when I have an ex-athlete on who's doing coaching. I love that because I think they can really empathize with the athlete, and I think it can make for a better coach. Doesn't always mean it's going to happen, but it can make for really a better coach. And I love that you're working with youth athletes too. Just looking at your Twitter feed and some of the values that you try to inspire in people, as well as it's very very similar to Coach Boyle as well. Some of the stuff that Coach Boyle's doing. So let's start out with the tennis world, because like I said, that I work with golfers, and I've been working with Titleist's their first World Golf Fitness Summit was in 2006, and to be honest, it's still not completely widely accepted in some of the lower ranks of the golf world, and that would be the not the PGA world, but the PGA professional in the country clubs, and there's some different reasons for that. But talk to us about you grew up as an elite tennis player. Give us some of your background kind of coming up in tennis, and was there any strength and conditioning, and was it part of the process, and where are we now in that process?
Well, Anthony, I was brought up in South Africa in the 80s and 90s, and started as a tennis player, as you mentioned, and then switched over to triathlon and duathlon because of the expenses in the sport. But yeah, absolutely. It really comes down to the quality of the coaching and the communication between the between the coach and the strength and conditioning trainer. That's where I find the biggest division is. In my opinion, in the tennis world, not enough tennis coaches understand enough about physical training, movement, and strength training. They think they do, and I'm not putting them all in that category, but They watch a few videos off YouTube or they pull a few videos off one of my sites, for example, and now they think they can strengthen condition. And I think that's where one of the divisions lies in our industry is that the strength and conditioning trainer doesn't understand enough about the tennis mechanics and the tennis technique, and vice versa. The tennis coach doesn't understand enough about the actual physical side of it. So we have this division in tennis. But, getting back to your question and the introduction, it does help to have a background in the game and to understand the game. But more importantly, and this is something I believe, is that if you're going to go specifically into a sport as a strength and conditioning trainer, so for example, if you're going to go into golf or you're going to go into baseball, for example, I believe the strength and conditioning trainer should at least have some type of qualification in coaching that sport. That doesn't mean he's going to be coaching the sport. It means that he understands the tactical side of it, the technical side of it, especially in tennis. For example, we have so many components. We have the serve, backhand, volley, drop shot. We have so many elements there that we need to understand, and I think that is so important in the strength and conditioning world in tennis, is that they understand the game, so to say, because I've just found that there's this huge division between the trainer, the fitness trainer, so to say, and the actual coach itself.
Yeah, and I think there's a similar issue as maybe like football, like high school football, where a lot of the coaches, same thing with tennis, they're former players, and when they came up in this world, they had a certain way that they did it. And they kind of just, it's almost like they just kind of do what they did, and they're not open to some of those new ideas. So
yeah.
It's very similar. But I want you to go into more detail about the demands of the sport that you look for in programming. So like what you were just saying, strength and conditioning coaches that don't understand the different components or the tactical side. Give us a few examples of some of those things and how you're going to attack it from the strength and conditioning perspective.
Sure. Tennis is such a unique sport. We have 3 to 4 different surfaces. We have grass, we have hard court, we have clay, we have indoor carpet sometimes. So, you have these 4 different surfaces which bring their challenges to the player: a lower bouncing ball, a faster bouncing ball, a higher bouncing ball. So you can understand how that changes all the mechanics of the shoulders, the hips, etc. We have to deal with different climates. We have to deal with, obviously, the travel aspect of it as well, of dealing with jet lag and dehydration, for example. And that's another area that I just find we overlook some of the most simple things in terms of the athlete having good sleep, having good nutrition, all these type of things that we seem to overlook. But, there's so many different elements that come into play there in tennis, and that's why it makes it such a unique sport. But, tennis is not a speed sport. It's, they're saying that the athletes are getting faster, etc., which they are, but it's a transitional speed sport. So in my method of coaching, I start with deceleration. You've got to have great breaks, because in tennis, you're accelerating, decelerating the whole time in a point. So there's one thing that a lot of trainers seem to spend a lot of time on: developing speed, but not a good braking system. So that's one area that I spend a lot of time on. Obviously, the balance component. When I'm, my method is geared around movement. I want to make the player a better mover. So balance is a huge component. I spend a lot of time on balance. Actually, every single day, we put in maybe 5 or 6 minutes of balance exercises after their training. Ground force application and the angle of the foot, for example, to push off, another important component. And of course, posture as well. And these are things that are so easily overlooked, because, a lot of the coaches are just drilling and not teaching the actual skill to that athlete. So those are some of the things I look for. I have a few set routines in my method as well. I have what I call an athlete protection program. So something, we can call that prehab, another fancy way of saying prehab, of setting up a proper injury prevention program for them. If we look at tennis, the main areas are ankles, a lot of sprained ankles, for example, hip issues because of the aggressive nature of the sport, and it's highly rotational as well. Just like you guys have in golf, you have a dominant hip, dominant shoulder. The same in tennis. A right-handed player is going to be planting that left foot down and hip, and then swinging with the right arm. So there's going to be that issue going on as well in terms of imbalances in the body. So those are some of the areas that I address from the word go. And, I like to, develop those routines for the player that they're working on their protection program or their prehab, if you like, a really, really well-structured warm-up. And, of course, soft tissue work as well, which in our method of coaching, they perform every 12 hours. So they'll do, for example, in the morning before they come to training, 10 minutes of some stick rolling or foam rolling, for example, and they'll do that again in the evening. So I just find that 24 hours is too much of a long time before you do soft tissue work again, especially if you're on a full-time program or even a program of, say, 2 to 3 hours per day. That's incredibly important to take care of the body in between the work.
Yeah, I was working with a kid when he was in high school, junior to senior year, and then he went to Division I tennis, and we kind of really focused on some different things for him. And the hips and the shoulders, the injuries, and it's funny because like golf, there is no contact, but there's that heavy rotation. But yeah, the hips. Man, his hips, I was really struggling with his hip mobility and really keeping his hips healthy. What are some things for you that you really try to focus on with the hips?
Sure. Also very, very big on the hips, Anthony, especially in sports where there's chaotic movement, so to say. So, for example, also work with badminton and squash players. And that's a chaotic movement. There's no actual set patterns there. Tennis as well. You could be moving laterally, behind, forward, whatever it may be. There's so many different patterns. But something I have set up in the warm up is and the cool down, so to say, is a hips before, hips after routine. And hips before is what I call switching on the hips before playing. So, example, I'll have them with a mini band doing one set of monster walks, for example, or some diagonal steps. And then afterwards, they'll do some work with a stretch strap, for example. So, they're just increasing their range of motion. So, I have hips before they train and hips after. So what I like to do is that they're getting that into their program every single day, because you know how it is. You give a kid or an athlete a program to do at home, and you're lucky if 50% are going to be doing that. So at least I know if I integrate that into the warm up. So we're not just getting purposeful practice. We're getting purposeful warm ups as well. And in the warm ups that we have, I have what we call the 4x4 routine. And the first thing is agility. Second thing is the dynamic flexibility. The third thing is the hips before. Okay, so as I just mentioned with the mini band. And the fourth thing, of course, which is easily forgotten in tennis, is the upper body warm-up. So they'll do a routine with a resistance tube. Those exercises will consist of some rotators, shoulders, some rotation exercises, for example, of the core. So yeah, it's so important to integrate those in and make sure the players are doing them, because I think last year on the professional tour, I think there was 5 or 6 of the top 100 players that were out due to hip injuries, and 3 of them have had serious operations. In fact, a player I worked with 2 years ago, Bernard Tomic, who's an Australian player who's actually just broken into the top 20, he was sent over by the Australian Federation to me to work on his hips for his rehabilitation after a double hip surgery, and the guy is 21. So, wow. Young players already breaking down. If you just see what some of these players are doing in their training programs, the amount of hours already at 12, 13, it's unreal. We talk about Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hour rule. I would say some of these kids are getting 15,000 hours, 20,000 hours before the age of 21. It's unreal.
Yeah. Well, we're actually going to get into that kind of the demands of the junior players with their incredible volume. But I want to keep it just right now with the strength coaches. Now, we talked a little bit about some of the things that some of the tennis coaches might be doing wrong with, quote unquote fitness program. What are some things you might see some strength coaches that are working with tennis players? Some of the mistakes, because I think I think two words say it all, right? Cardio tennis, right? That's such a popular program, and people kind of think that's the way that they should train. What are some things that you've seen strength coaches that you're like, wow, that's not a good direction to go in?
Getting back to what I started with, not understanding the mechanics of the sport enough, interfering in things with the technical side of the player. So, if they start changing footwork patterns, they've got to understand that changes patterns through the kinetic chain right up through the body. And that's where, especially in tennis, Anthony, where we have this division of the coaches being very fearful of giving their player to a strength and conditioning trainer who starts to mess around with mechanics and footwork, etc., because that changes the whole system and biomechanics of the player for when they strike a ball. But I think a big problem as well is that it's understanding the total load that's being put on that athlete. So not just their physical training program and their movement program or their strength program, it's understanding the load of the athlete in terms of how much tennis they're doing in a day, what they're doing in that session. And then, of course, the kids that are in school, you've got to understand that whole bigger picture. It's not just about you, the strength and conditioning trainer. So, just saying there's kids that are doing 20 to 25 hours a week of just one single sport. And that's why we have such a huge dropout in our sport. I think the stats are over 70% by the age of 13 of kids will drop out of a sport.
Damn. That's
bad. It is a big problem. And we need to educate especially the parents on these things, because you know how it is, Anthony. They always think it's not going to be their kid. My kid is going to be the next big thing, and it's not going to happen to us. But unfortunately, being in the business, in the sports performance business for 22 years, I've seen so many really, really talented and great kids at 12, 13 just be lost to the sport at 15 or 16. So, that's a big problem. So, yeah.
We were talking earlier because I was telling you about off the phone is that when I was training Ryan, one of the things I learned, and this is another thing that a lot of coaches don't understand about some of this USTA stuff, is you work with a junior player, but they have this incredible volume that you're talking about because there's this ranking system with USTA that a lot of the kids need to be ranked to try to get into a school, even though, so a lot of kids don't play high school sports, so they're missing out on this great high school experience with their high school team because the competition probably isn't good enough. I know that's what happens around here. The kids have told me the competition's not good enough in the high school leagues because the kids are playing have to travel for these USTA events to get the points so then they can get into college. Can you just kind of give people an overview of that? And really, what do you do to combat that? What are some things you're trying to do to kind of, maybe lessen that volume with these kids?
Anthony, that's probably the number one question or issue I get from most parents, not just here in the United States, but around the world with regards how much should their kid be doing. And even, we have a lot of desperate parents in this sport, I'm sure, just like ice hockey does and baseball does, is, what's the best chance to get my kid into a great school or get them into professional sport? And, you see like their kid is 10 or 11 and you're like, it's our job to educate those parents. And this is something I've gone into a lot is parent education and consulting and speaking around at different clubs. And it's really getting sought after now by a lot of the people that want me to come out and talk to the athletes, but also hold a parent workshop or a parent seminar on how much their kid should be doing at a certain age, what's the most beneficial, what are the biggest pitfalls in the sport, what's the biggest ages that are dropping out of the sport, for example. But, this is a problem that's, like I said, not just in the United States, but that problem is with the LTA, the British system as well. It's with, many countries around the world where already at 12 years of age, they're thinking of taking these kids out of school and putting them into a full-time program. And, I'll never forget a chat I had with a former 5-time Grand Slam champion, Mats Wilander of Sweden. And he said, hey, the best 13 or 14-year-old kids are simply hit more balls than any other kid. That's what it comes down to. But where are they at 16, 17? If you look at the list of names that are on junior Grand Slam trophies, you've not heard of them again. They've disappeared by the age of 18 or 19, and that's a sad, sad thing. And there is this disease. There is this disease of chasing points, chasing funding, chasing ranking at 12, 13 years old, and that stunts the development of the player because they're just so busy traveling, never mind the country, but traveling the world to go chase points and chase tournaments that they're not getting developed properly enough. They're not working on that technique and those athletic skills, those important things, when you're 13, 14 years of age.
Yeah, it's one of those sports that they really there's such a focus on early specialization. I know you're a multi-sport athlete yourself, so is that something you're really trying to do with some of these younger players? Is get them to understand, the value of the other sports?
Absolutely, and this is something I've seen in the best athletes I've worked with, Anthony. I've worked with the number one in the world in tennis, the number one in the world in squash, and a whole host of players of that caliber. And I'm not bragging here or anything, but the common denominator here is that they've all been multi-sport athletes. You take out a soccer ball, you take out a basketball, and they'll kick your butt. They're so good at other sports. And of course, so competitive because that's what's made them, a top athlete in the world is that they're so darn competitive. They want to beat you at cards. They want to beat you at ping pong. they want to beat you at anything that you do. But they're all multi-sport athletes. They can do other things. And this is something I try and pass on to the parents that I consult or speak to and the kids is that, hey, you got to develop the athlete first before the player. And enjoy the sports because another thing is that parent might want that kid to be a tennis player or a golf player. And I'm sure you've seen it as well, Anthony, in your side of things. But you know what? The kid doesn't really like the sport. They maybe like another sport. And I try and bring out those things and say, hey, give the kid another chance to play some soccer or basketball. And, I try and sell it in a way of, hey, it's going to help their tennis. They're going to move better. Meanwhile, thinking, I know this kid might actually prefer another sport. Because at the end of the day, it's not about us. It's not about us as coaches. It's not about us as parents. It's about the kid, the athlete, of what they want to do. So that's one of the messages I really try to bring forward. And Roger Federer, Novak, these players, they're fantastic at other sports. They can play squash well. They can play soccer well. And that's one of the things I've seen with the athletes I've trained in tennis.
Good stuff, and I think it's a good segue into our next kind of section, and that would be on coaching. I see you talk a lot about coaching and developing our coaching skills. What are some things you try to always work on? What's a good coach to you?
Anthony, a good coach to me is someone who has great core values and principles. I always say it starts with setting your standards. I break that into 3 areas: setting your personal standards, so your example being the most important thing. Second of all, the standards you set for your organization or your company or the staff you have under you, if you do, what's expected there. And then third thing is the standards of your athletes, what's expected there, what's accepted, what's not accepted. For me, that's where it starts. A great coach is continually investing in themselves, and that's a key thing. Is that every day, you're as Coach Boyle says, you're a life learner. You're getting up every morning and you're reading, researching, listening to podcasts. And on that note, I'd like to thank you guys, Anthony, because while I was training for a few of my marathons this year, I was able to listen to your podcasts and just listen to some unbelievable speakers and coaches out there. And I call it learn, by the way. It's a wordplay of learning and running. So I call it learn. While I'm running, I'm learning. So
Nice.
A great coach, Anthony, has a great energy. I almost compare a great coach to being a DJ at a radio station. Have you ever heard a DJ that sounds morbid and he's telling you all his life problems on the radio station? No, you haven't. No matter what's going on in that DJ's life, he has to come to that show and give it his best. And as coaches, we need to do that as well. Not bringing your problems to the gym or bringing them to the track or field or whatever it may be. So a great energy, because energy is contagious. And another big one is be nice. As Coach Boyle says, be a certified nice person. And it's so big because I admit myself in my 20s and maybe early 30s, I could have been a nicer person. And, if this is one thing I can pass on to younger coaches or coaches out there is be a nice person, because that is where your business is going to come from. It's not your knowledge and the amount of information, et cetera. I call it the 80-20. 80% will come from your interpersonal skills, and 20% will come from your knowledge and your and what you know, and the X's and O's, so to say. So, yeah, those are some of the things that mean a lot to me. They might not mean a lot to others, but those are some of the things I try and work on myself.
Absolutely, and I know you're big on setting that example as well. And I right on your website you have your success is found in your daily 1%, and I love the 420s that you were talking about. But, give us, expand on this success is found in your daily 1%, and tell us a little bit about your habits in the 420s.
I think if you have to look into the common denominators of successful people, is that they have great habits and routines. They don't do anything exceptionally well, like huge. They're just getting those small, important things done every day. Example, successful people get up early. Successful people have purpose. Successful people have a good breakfast. They read every day. They research. They have good relationships with their staff and with other people. The small things, the 1%, are those small things that you hardly see, but they're marginal gains every single day once they're added up. So, eating correctly, getting your 20 minutes of stretching, for example. You just mentioned the 420s there. The 420s I have that I have to get in every day, no matter where I might be in the world, for example, are 20 minutes of stretching, 20 minutes of reading, which I usually end up doing more, but that's the bare minimum. A 20-minute nap, because I believe even as a coach, I still need to perform like an athlete. And that doesn't mean on the field. That means with my energy levels. So I want to maximize my second part of the day. So it's a little bit of something I've brought over from my athletic career, of getting that important 20 to 30-minute nap in the afternoon. And my last 20 minutes is thoughtfulness. Just spending 20 minutes to send messages to maybe athletes I'm training or players that are training somewhere around the world or competing, should I say, somebody's birthday, maybe somebody that's ill, for example. And because you're just nurturing those relationships, which is the most important thing. So, yeah, those 1% are just those small things that you're consistently doing every day. Success is found in consistency, not brilliance and one-off things. So those are some of the things.
Love it. Good stuff. Allistair, thank you so much for coming on today. I know I actually emailed you this morning to do this, and I know you're heading off to Australia to start some training there. But we really appreciate your insight. I love your Twitter feed. I'll remind everybody you can go to themccawmethod.com, and that's the McCaw, MCCAW method.com, and make sure you follow Allistair on Twitter as well. I got some great stuff there. So Allistair, thanks so much for coming on.
Anthony, thanks so much, and thanks for all you do for us coaches out there. It's a great source of information, and it's really helped me as a coach.
Awesome. All right, that's going to do it for episode 179 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Special thanks to Chris Poirier, Aaron McGurr, and the folks over at Perform Better. You can check them out at performbetter.com for all their products and info on their educational seminars. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Allistair McCaw for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning and performance enhancement. Alan Cosgrove for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Frank Dolan and Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. Keir Wenham-Flatt for his insights into the art of coaching with Exos. Check them out at teamexos.com/education. And of course, remember you can join strengthcoach.com and have access to the site for just $1, 3 days, just $1. To access that offer, go to strengthcoach.com. Click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. My name is Anthony Renner. You can reach me at strengthcoachpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again, and I'll speak to you next time.